Welcome in. Take a breath. You are among people who get it. Nothing forced, nothing scripted. Just real stories and a space to reflect. Let's get to it.
When we say we are women, we mean that we are brave, we are strong, we are capable, we are unique, we are woman to woman.
Good afternoon, South Africa. Good afternoon, Africa. It's good to be back with you. And we bring today a very special crew. But let me greet first Tali. Welcome, Tali, to Woman to Woman.
Thank you, Mrs. Marcia. I really feel part of the family by now.
No, you are already anyway.
Good afternoon to everyone who is watching us.
Today, we are going to speak a little bit about what youth goes through mostly, but I am sure it's not only to the youth, because we receive calls here and there. And sometimes we are sitting, counseling someone, and that question pops up. How can I deal with? And the list is long. That's why I'm throwing the ball to PJ today. Good afternoon to you, PJ.
Good afternoon, Miss Marcia. Good afternoon, everybody. What's good? Good to be back here with the Woman to Woman fam, the first of us here. Not yet taking over, but the first here for 2026.
You're not going to greet your wife.
I've greeted her, Miss Marcia, but I'll gladly greet her once again. Good
Make it
afternoon,
official.
my dear love, in front of everybody. I don't want to make her blush.
And of course, let me introduce to you our 6 participants. Welcome to Woman to Woman.
Thank you.
So it's adorable Stephanie, Melissa,
Dino.
And
Percy.
and Sipo. Why they are here? Because they are going to get real today. They are going to speak from their own experience to help you to deal with the list. But PJ, you didn't go to the list. Would you mind telling us the list that not only youth, but many who are even new in the church, new in the faith, struggles with?
It's a pretty lengthy list, Miss Marcia, but I'll try to summarize it as much as possible. Many people generally say that, especially the Christian journey for young people, is a journey of bore. It's something that's dull, it's boring, you are losing yourself, you are losing or missing out on your youth, missing out on the fun. They say that the people who suffer the most FOMO are young Christians. But they do not know the behind the scenes of this life, especially the challenges, because it's the extreme of both worlds, the extreme of peer pressure, where everybody's going in one direction, and you actually have to go the opposite direction. Now think about it, because as young people, most are very concerned about their appearance. Most are concerned about fitting in, their appearance, how they look before their friends, before their peers, schoolmates, classmates, and workmates, whatever it may be. And imagine them having to go the opposite direction. So we have peer pressure. We have the challenges which many face at home, where the family have their one belief, they go in one direction, and now this young person says, I believe in something else. I believe in this here. We have the challenge when they mature and when they realize that it's time for me to find someone for my love life, and they realize that all the people who are apparently offered to them oppose all their beliefs. That person might have had the criteria before they decided to carry their cross, but eventually they meet people who, appearance-wise or in every apparent way, they have everything, but that young person realizes that in the long run, that is not going to be someone suitable. Then we have the challenges. Naturally, that is the expectations, especially in South Africa, how many young people, they have the expectation from the family. And now when they are opposing their family, that expectation for them to be doing well in their career, it just grows. the challenges are insurmountable. We cannot even, like I said, Miss Marcia, we can't number all of them, but I could say that these are one of the main ones, especially for those when they embark on this journey and say, you know what, I want to give away my old habits, my bad lifestyle. And the ironic thing, by the way, is that many of them, when they come home drinking, when they get home drinking, partying, many parents, they even complain about that lifestyle. And then one day they decide, I no longer want to do that. They start respecting their parents. They start living a life which is upright. But because their beliefs do not match with what sometimes the family believes in, guess what? They are doomed. Many have been threatened or even kicked out of their homes. Many have been physically, emotionally abused, mistreated. It's kind of like you're going to carry this cross. But I do believe that for a young person, sometimes there are two crosses. The cross of following the Lord, as we do call it in Christianity, and the cross of being young and all the temptations. Nowadays, we have social media, which shows to us all the glamour left, right, and center. How does a young person, the question of many are, how can I refrain from all of that? What is okay and what is not okay? What is the limitation? And not to mention, there's also the other extreme where some become fanatics. And we don't want anybody to become a fanatic or religious per se. How does a young person learn to actually draw that fine line in doing what is right, living an upright life, but not going the other way, the other extreme?
And this is what we are going to help you with, because to answer to all those questions and this huge list, which we can add how to cope with peer pressure, fit in, being accepted, temptation, lust, how do you keep yourself to the goals and to the values that you learn in Christianity?
And some of them even think, is it worth it? Because I've been trying, but it's so hard. So is this sacrifice worth it? So today we are going to answer that question.
As a matter of fact, today we will.
Yes.
And this is exactly what you guys doing here. If they are here, it's because you have remained, you overcame it. But was it easy?
No.
So I need a volunteer to start.
Yeah, so in regards to what I've gotten, the biggest temptation in terms of...
How old were you when you arrived in the church?
Oh, I arrived in the church, I think I was 5 years old. So I basically grew up in the church. And learning the ways of how one should live, how one should act and your character, it wasn't always easy having this life at church and having your life at school. So of course, you spend most of your time in school, so they've got more influence. Mm-hmm. And then growing up, knowing the truth and knowing what is false, I chose what was false. I had a good example at home with my parents. My parents were married, and even though growing up I had a very easy life, all of a sudden we entered into some certain struggles financially, and my parents still remained together. They had a good example, but look at what the influence I had received from outside turned me into. I had a good example, and I wanted that example, and what I was told outside was, you can start dating at any age. So I started dating very young, at 13. And of course, I want what my parents have, so let me go get what my parents have. Being that age, it wasn't wise for me to engage in those relationships, because those women or those girls at the time weren't ready. So I'd pour out my heart. I'd give them like the love that they wanted, and they kept on breaking my heart. And I'd try first one, second one, third one. I think round about the age of 16, so for 3 years, probably I dated 4, 5 different people. And they were the ones who were breaking my heart. I eventually turned and I was like, you know what? No one is taking care of this heart, so let me pay back. And it started off with one, and eventually I was juggling at the worst point of my life at the age of 19, 18 or 19. I was juggling plus minus 9 relationships. So, but I knew the truth. I knew what was right and what was wrong.
How would you reconcile in your mind? Because I assume that you still keep coming to the church.
Yes.
Every Sunday, at least.
Yes.
How would you reconcile this kind of life in the church, being the good guy, and the frustration of not having what you saw from your parents, and this other side of you in these relationships?
What you don't realize whilst doing all of those things is it becomes an addiction, but you don't see it as an addiction because it's not like you injecting something in your arm, but you tend to get addicted to the attention you're getting. So at church, I'd come, and honestly, what was being said, it was like I was numb to it. The excitement, the ecstasy I was getting from these relationships. And then when it was time to take a decision, I realized that all of these people aren't really, I'm not really happy. Even though I've got the respect. At school, I had a lot of respect from, the gangsters, the footballers, and everyone else. I had the reputation, but I wasn't really happy. That's when I realized that something's wrong, because I'm supposed to be happy. I'm famous at school. I'm known by everyone at school, and I've got this reputation.
Popular with the girls.
Yes. So, and also, I just forgot to include that the power it gives you. So that satisfaction of, I can walk away from this one and she'll cry. Yeah, so that's how I came to the church.
Control.
Yes, the control, the power. Eventually, once I realized that part is not making me happy, I had a lot of questions. And that's when I remembered all that was being said in the church, the preachings. That come in terms of when I think about, why am I feeling like this? Why am I living? Why am I alive? What is this emptiness inside of me? And that's when those preachings would come. Remember, I said I was numb before. Mm-hmm. So I'd come to church and I didn't even pretend. I didn't want to pretend. I didn't want to be there. But I'd come because if I wouldn't come, my mom would say, you're not gonna eat in my house. So basically that's why I was coming. And yeah, took that decision.
So it's a good peer pressure.
Yeah, it was good from my mom.
Yeah.
But from outside, it was horrible. It was horrible.
So then you decided to change.
Mm-hmm.
How was it? Easy?
No, it was hard.
What was I noticed you have struggled with your love life.
Yes.
Once you decided to do what was right, what was your biggest temptation, or what was your biggest challenge?
My biggest challenge, remember, I'm juggling 9 relationships. To categorize the relationships so you can have an understanding, I had main...
Never thought about fires in that manner. Tags, you know? Red tags.
I had main chicks and side chicks. So I had 3 names and 3 sides.
And now you met Jesus.
6
Good.
sides. Yes, and now I've got Jesus. So the hardest thing was cutting them all off, and they stay cut. It was so hard that I didn't attempt it once. I attempted it probably like 3 times. So I didn't get to 9 overnight. The first time I had 3, and I cut them all off, and I thought I'd taken my decision. And then a few months later, I think it was 3 months later, I just went to one party, and within like a month, I had 6. So it had doubled. And then the second time I had to cut off, let's just say 6, I can't remember the specific numbers, and I cut them all off. And it wasn't a decision, it was based on emotions. Because now I knew the truth, and I was listening to the truth, but I hadn't taken my decision. It was more emotional. So I cut them all off. And then a few months later, also again, took one party, went to one party, and then I was guilty for going to a party. Then I was like, it's no use. Let me start from scratch. Went back. And by the time I was done with that, it was 9, back to 9. So it was
So you were trying, but not keeping up to your own vows.
No, I wasn't keeping up to I was trying with the whole of my strength and I was failing.
How was it when you really decided and now you had to be alone?
For you guys to get like a picture on what had to happen, I was pursuing a career, and that career, it wasn't working out. And I had an argument with my mom at the time. And my mom told me it's either you go choose a more, I can say, a more, what's the word for it?
Stable career.
Stable career. Yeah, a more stable career. Or you leave my house. Now I was in a corner and I had 9 relationships. So I stormed out of the house, went to the place. The funny part is when I took the decision, I was at the place where I felt the most power, which was like the chill spot where I used to chill with my ex-girlfriends at the time. So I went to that chill spot because it was the only safe place I knew. And at that time, I was like, I just told myself, if what the pastors are saying at the church is true, then I want to see you right now, you being God. And I was like, I'm not going to leave here until I see you physically.
And you were not in a church.
I wasn't in the church. And then, funny enough, I was there for 1 hour, 30 minutes, saying the same thing over again. So I wasn't saying nice words and, churchy things. I was like, if you exist, you exist. If you don't, you don't. And I said the last part of my 1 hour, 30 minutes there, I was like, if you don't show yourself, I'll go back to the old life. And funny enough, nothing happened, nothing at all. And I returned back home. The very next day, when I tried, because I wasn't only participating in these relationships, I was also watching adult content at home on my phone. So the very next day, when I just committed that prayer alone in a parking lot, when I tried going back to watching my own life, watching adult content, I had no satisfaction from it. I actually felt stupid. I don't know, the best word to use is foolish or stupid and embarrassed. And then that's when I realized that, no, something has changed inside of me. From that moment onwards, I've never watched adult content. From that day onwards. So it actually shows that whatever I had said that night and how I said it,
God
there was
heard,
an intervention.
even though if it was not in the church.
Yes, there was already an intervention there. And that's when my life started changing.
Great. Now I need one of the girls. You can volunteer, or we? Name it.
Okay, I can go. I don't mind. Okay, so with me, so I kind of grew up in the church. So from a very young age as well, I grew up in the church. And then eventually, I wasn't really committed in the church, but eventually, I think around like grade 11, I think I was like 16 or so, I decided to leave. And I stopped coming to church. And the reason why is because I started getting involved with friendships.
Church is boring.
Church is boring.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to fit in. Like I wanted to fit in with the friends at school. I wanted to feel like I belonged. So I did what would make me feel like I belonged, started partying, started drinking, going out with friends. And that became my life, started dating around. And then eventually I came back to church. I was, how old, 18? It was my first year in varsity. And the reason why I came back was because I realized like there was this deep emptiness inside of me. And then also, it was my first year in varsity and I was failing school dismally. And before that, I'd never failed. I was always like a straight A student. I was always one of the top in the class. And then I got to varsity and it was like, oh, life is getting real. And at that time, I was also going through a very bad breakup with a boyfriend. So it was like I was failing, I was going through a bad breakup. And I was also heavily addicted to adult content. So it was just like a lot. And it was like, it's very heavy on your mind when you watch a lot of, consume a lot of adult content. So my mind just felt very heavy. I would go to counseling sessions. I just felt this constant emptiness inside of me, and I couldn't explain it. I couldn't explain it in words. Tried drinking and all of that. And I would be one of those people, I would always have like alcohol under my pillow just to be able to cope with life. And then I came to church, back to church. The day that I came back, I remember it was a Wednesday. And I was like, my God, I'm going to give you a chance because I'm feeling empty. I don't know where my life is going. I'm failing at school. I see no way out and I don't know what to do. So I just started coming. Actually, the first Sunday I came, I was drunk. But in that drunken state, I took a decision to like, you know what, God, I want to change my life around. And it wasn't easy. There was a lot of temptations, friends started leaving me when I started to try and change my life around. Friends started to decide to turn their backs on me. I lost a lot of friends. I stopped drinking, I stopped partying. But for me, the hardest thing for me was giving up adult content. That was like the hardest thing. That was like my weak spot. I tried over and over again, but I'll always find myself going back to that state.
That was a hard moment.
That was the hardest.
The hard one.
Yeah, that was my weak point.
Pick one.
Okay, Sipo.
Okay.
Just to feel back. You know?
Thank you. Okay, similar story with me. I grew up in the church. I never actually like came to a state of leaving, but growing up in the church, I learned everything, well, not everything, but like most about
I think all
the
of you
Bible.
who didn't leave kept two lives, né? In and out, Sunday in, from Monday to Saturday out.
Sometimes Sunday morning in,
Sunday evening, let me do something else.
I feel like, especially with people who grew up with church in the church, we have this huge difficulty because we grew up learning so much, and we always have this thing of like, what about the world out there? I want to know how things are out there.
Is
We
it
hear
that
so many.
as bad as they
As
say?
people say,
If it's so bad, why are so many people out and few inside?
Exactly,
Guys
exactly.
go.
Yes, but for me, my biggest challenge when growing up was the confidence. I always struggled to look at myself. I always looked at myself and I was like, I'm nothing. Because I grew up in a family where we struggled. We lacked financially. We did not have things. There was a point when we had things in life, things that were okay, to at least say, okay, my dad is driving or something like that. But how he got those things, how we ran things in our family, we had like an illegal family business. So we got things and we lost things. So, but growing up in the church, doing things that are wrong. But for me, the biggest thing was inside, I always felt like everyone else is better than me. Everyone else, I can't amount. I always felt like I have to bow down in front of everyone who comes my way. So much so that even if, and for example, with people who say they are facing temptations, they're facing lust, they're facing these type of problems, in my case, if I were to have that, I would never have the confidence to approach a girl. If I ever saw that a lady looks nice, I would never speak to that person because I'm like, there's no way.
Second guess yourself all the way.
All
That
the
was
time.
your biggest challenge.
That was my biggest challenge. But okay, coming to the church, okay, I managed to have moments where, okay, have a little conversation here and there, speak to people, okay, things like that. But I never would like go and want to ask someone out because my biggest fear is rejection. I always see a big no coming, always. What do I result to do? I'm like, I can find
other alternatives to pleasure myself, and that's where I would fall into adult content. Actually, I was exposed to adult content from a very young age. I think it was the age of 7, because of the business that we had, copying DVDs, so that was like free access there at home. Firstly, I never knew it was possible to find it online. It was just there for us. Not that it was given to us, but we as children, we were nosy. We always had our ways of finding these things. And so of course, adult content was one of the things that we would like fall into and want to go to, so that I can like feel good, so that I can pleasure myself. Being in the church, I knew that was very wrong. I knew it was something that was wrong. And after growing, being in the church, coming after, and getting to a point where I say, you know what? I know that what I do, how I live, this is wrong. I want to change. Okay, changing and stopping is not the biggest difficulty. So stopping to do things that were wrong, I was okay, because I wasn't like a heavy sinner. But what I did goes back to the confidence. I blamed myself. It's as if I felt this guilt, and I carried that on with me so long, so much so that even though I could stop doing things, I never freed myself the burden from sins that I let go of years ago. And that weighed me down through primary school, through high school, and my heaviness I had to carry that heaviness with me, and I was like, I don't know how to end this. I don't know how to feel free.
Sipho, I have a question, because it might be the situation of many people out there. Because of lack of confidence, feeling that you were not enough, would you have that kind of feeling even towards God? Like, if God needs to look down at me, there are other 100 that are better than me, so God will not look at me. That sense of rejection, that sense of not fitting in, but in your spiritual life with God.
Yes, and that was the biggest part about why I never elevated spiritually, because I always felt like God, because I couldn't forgive myself, I always thought God never forgave me. God sees me as this horrible, dirty person inside, and I am nothing.
And it didn't matter what the pastor would preach, what the mentors would speak, it would not go in your mind.
It would not sink in. Now my life is different, but before then it took forever for it to click that I am holding myself back.
Even when you stopped doing all wrong, you were serious in the church, that voice in your mind, you're not good enough, you're not capable, they are not going to call you, they don't count on you, you don't have what it takes, still.
Yes.
So that was your biggest challenge, not sin itself, but how to find your purpose and value.
Exactly. I always looked at myself and was like, I have no purpose. I don't know what to do with my life. I don't know what I want. Those questions when people say, what do you want to do when you grow up? I would copy another person and say engineer. This one says
I like
engineer,
very much those questions. What are your goals in 1 year's time, 3 years' time, 5 years' time? I don't even know today.
Never had answers for those. Never.
Right message, right moment, right on time. That's Women to Women. We are live every Friday at 3 p.m. with bold, honest conversations that challenge, inspire, and keep it real. Miss the live show? Replays are always available. Find us on Instagram, YouTube, or Facebook. Just search Women to Women _TV, follow the official page, and you are in. WhatsApp at women-to-women_TV, Freedom on Air Radio on Play Store and Apple Store. Scan the QR code and tap straight in. Woman to Women, where values are treasured.
Adorable.
Yes. With me, I feel it was a bit different but similar. I grew up in a Christian home where we would go to church and everybody was a believer. But at the same time, growing up, I think to a certain extent, I really wanted to uphold that for myself, and I wanted to be that strict girl who has Christian values and all that. And for a long time in my primary school years, I could do that. But when you start to grow up into your teens, into your high school, then that's where you start to sort of question stuff. So growing up with me, what I had faced was abuse. So I grew up in a Christian family, but a very abusive family. There was physical abuse, there was emotional abuse, and there was also sexual abuse. So up until a certain point where I was taken to my mother, and that's when things maybe started to change a bit, and I was not exposed to that much abuse, but there was still that stigma within me. Going to church, being a child that was doing things the right way and not much bending the rules, I would sort of like try and keep within a certain line. And as I said, it was easy for me in primary because everything in primary is like, you can't do that. But when you get to high school and you now experience a whole new dimension of people, girls that are out for dating, and the conversation around you is literally, who are you dating? Do you have a boyfriend? And you seem like the boring person in the group because now you are not doing any of those things. And when I started to speak up about my story and how I grew up, a lot of people in high school started to say, maybe you're uptight because of the things that you went through, so maybe you should let loose, leave a little, get somebody to date. So I started dating, and because of that peer pressure that I would get in high school to say, okay, maybe let me loosen up, live a little so that I can also fit in and not be that strict, adorable who is morally always upright and things like that. So I would struggle with that. So I got myself a boyfriend and I started dating.
How old were you?
I was 12.
Oh my gosh.
13 when I started
This is
dating.
child abuse.
Yeah.
Oh, the teens will disagree with me. Sorry.
And you only started dating because people told you to do, not because you felt like doing.
Yeah.
Just because of the peer pressure.
I wanted to be relevant also, to come in and say, he bought me a chocolate.
How did, in your mind, because that's interesting. You see, we have, you guys grew up in the church, but one met God in the parking lot. The other one came to the church drunkard. And you grew up in a Christian family, so facade of Christianity, of good values, but you experienced verbal abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse. How would you reconcile Christianity with what you have been through?
In a sense, I think I had an obscure view of what Christianity was. For me, it was like a set of strict rules that would need to be followed regardless of how you felt or how you thought. Like, it didn't matter, you didn't matter much, but the values mattered more because the examples for me were not that good.
So it was more about rules rather than character.
Yeah.
Because you didn't have much character or example of character, Christian character, in the people you lived with.
Yes.
But you had the rules,
yes,
the doctrine.
Yes.
Don't do this, do this. So you didn't know what to be a Christian truly was like.
Yeah.
Once you came to the church, once you found your way, what was the hardest thing that you had to deal with?
For me, it was letting go of the idea that God loved me and not being self-confident and, the low self-esteem. That a person like me, a person who has gone through so much, who has done so much, can be forgiven by a God so great. I'm just nothing. And also to understand that God is a father. I saw him as an authority that dictates what you need to do and how you need to do it, but not as a father who was loving and caring. That was my biggest challenge.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I have here many examples working with women that they can see God, God as the Lord, God as provider, but when you talk about God as a father, there is an area they don't want to, because either they don't have a father, they were abandoned by a father, or they were abused. And in your case, the first knowledge about God, it was a very distorted one, because those who told you, do this, don't do that, were doing something else, were living something else. So it was very hard for you to see him as a father. And I guess you would not see that he would be able to love you.
Yeah, true.
Different experiences, isn't that?
Different. And as you said, that not those who had a father, most of them didn't have a loving father. So to understand that he's a father and he's a loving father, I think it's very hard. Is there, from the two who are missing, anyone who didn't?
No, I need to make a question here. Is there anyone who came to the church or who did not grow up in the church?
That's what I was about to ask.
Any of you, but me. I'm the only one here. Because you guys, PJ, and you grew up. That one grew up more outside the church than in the church anyway. So all of you were in the church very young.
Yes.
Okay, so next one, maybe Dino.
Okay. Coming to the church, I grew up in the church. But
I like that.
But before coming to the church, already I had a situation, and my situation was family related. Because I grew up in a family whereby there was a lot of violence, physical abuse between my mother and my father. So when I was young in primary, whenever I come back from school, I would know that every night there's going to be a fight. And as a child, I think it disturbs your mental being or state, because you have to go to school and focus and pass, but at the very same time, there is a situation at home. So that brought a lot of hatred and anger, because there are days where I'll be placed outside and hearing the voice of my mother inside the house crying and getting beat up by my father. So they divorced, and we had to go and stay with my grandmother, of which she's my mother's mom. And then when we got that side, my grandmother was in the church already. And then all of us, we decided to take a decision and say, let us go to the church. But with that same mindset, me personally, I had a lot of things going on inside of me.
Wounds were there already.
Yes, I had a lot of anger, resentment towards my father and God himself, because I was asking myself, if other young children there at school, they have both their parents, taking them to school, then why me am I suffering in this situation like this, you see? So growing up, because I was a very quiet child, I was super quiet at school, and not because of maybe I was under depression or naturally I'm someone who's quiet. And then when I went to secondary school, that's when I started meeting up new friends, and they introduced me to alcohol and ladies. And that's where I found a sense of comfort, because when I was there, I would forget about my problems. I would be there with my friends, drinking alcohol. I had a lot of girlfriends, multiple girlfriends I had. And as time went by, because I remember now, when I went to high school, that's when some of my friends, they went to different areas. I was only left with few friends. And when we are in high school, that's where we have to plan our lives. And imagine as a young guy without a father in your life, and a father who has principles and the responsibility, for you it's difficult to maneuver through life because you wanted someone to be there and to guide and to become your example. But then it happened that when I finished my matric, my life was a mess already. Because at that time, when we finished matric, a lot of us, like some of the people, they go to other provinces, other people, they go to other because of jobs and universities and other things.
Actually, when you finish and pass your matric, it's called like your freedom.
Your freedom, exactly.
Now you are free to do whatever you want. That is what is generally in the youth mind, isn't that?
Yeah. So when some of my friends, they left, I realized that I was on my own now. And still I had this anger inside of me. And I was like, where can I take out this anger? Then I started treating my girlfriends in a bad way, you see. Sometimes I will speak bad words. Sometimes I will go to the tavern, come back drunk. And that emotional abuse, I was capable of that back then because they will even tell me that you are so abusive. And I'll be like, why are you saying that? Because I'm not physically abusive. But they will be like, nah, through your words, you are abusive, you see. So I had a lot of anger, which led me to have a lot of girlfriends. And I was a party pooper. I hate my father and even my mother at some point because I was like, didn't she see that this guy was not good from the start? But at some point I realized that maybe she was too in love and she couldn't realize that, you see. But being in the church anyway, hearing the preachings, having mentors, people talking to me, at some point I was like, if these people, they say this thing to me, that maybe like this anger at some point will come out and I have to forgive my father. And some of them, they had the same experience that I had. And I was like, if these people, okay, they manage to overcome these things, then let me pay attention to what they are saying. And at some point, maybe my life will change as well. But then I managed to overcome as well.
What was the most difficult challenge after you have made your decision? I'm going to change, I'm going to give my life to God, but you had to battle against.
Yeah, the most difficult part was that, when you are used to a certain lifestyle, it's difficult for you to come out of it because it has a lot of things around it, like friends are there, you see. So when you say to them, like, okay, man, tomorrow I'm going to the church, then they'll be like, man, come on, man, like, you going to the church, you are now a pastor, those words that they say. But I had to develop courage inside of me because I was realizing that in as much as I'm with these guys, of which they are my friends, but still I remain the same. I have this emptiness inside of me. I have this anger inside of me. I'm suffering from depression. If they are my friends, why are they unable to assist me with that situation? Because if I'm there, I have to be peaceful. But still, it's the same thing. I'm there with them, but I'm still suffering from this depression. So I had to sit down and evaluate myself, evaluate my life, and ask myself, like, in the 10 upcoming years, where do I want to see myself? Where do I want to see myself? Because also I had that thing of saying to myself that I have to be an example. Because I had a father who was supposed to be an example, but he didn't become much of an example. So I myself have to decide to become an example to the upcoming generation. And that's when I said, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to put aside everything. Whether I'm going to get judged at some point by my friends, doesn't matter. But because of the sake of my life and for the sake of the upcoming generation, because they have to find an example at some point. Then I have to put aside everything and look forward. So the most
difficult thing was to quit your circle of friends.
Exactly.
The attention.
Yeah. Because during that time we were, when you are soccer guys, because you used to play soccer, I was good in terms of playing soccer. And we were popular there.
Actually, you found some comfort in being with your friends.
Yeah.
No? Because at home, imagine, father's not there, mother divorced, kids, struggles. So your comfort came being with friends.
With my friends.
And now you saw that those friends were not adding on.
Exactly.
And to let them go, it was hard.
Exactly.
Now, Melissa, you're the last for now.
Basically,
you
also
grew up in the church, we know.
But I wouldn't say I was an angry child. I just didn't believe. I think that's how I'd sum up my whole young experience.
because I came from separate parents. So the time they separated, I was there, and I remember the big fight going on. And I had this thing in my mind. I hear everyone saying peer pressure of the dating and all of that. But from a very young age, I was very decided. I don't care who comes my way. I don't want them. I don't want any guy next to me. I will not end up like my parents. And it was a very determined thought, to the extent I remember I was in primary and I was even picked up by my classmates, pushed into a corner in order to kiss a guy, and I cried. And I'm like, I'm not going to kiss anyone. I don't care who you are. I don't want. And it was like, why are you crying? It's not a big thing. But I was like, no, I don't want to. It was that decided thing of, I don't believe in marriage. I don't believe in dating. Because I'd sit, because I was a very quiet child. So everyone would come and tell me, oh, I cheated on this person. Oh, I did this. Oh, I don't like him because of this. So it was like, I could see all the pretenses, like, why are you guys doing it? It was like, I didn't understand. I couldn't, like, why are you doing it? If you don't want it, then leave it. Stop messing each other's hearts. I was that type of kid because I really not hated, but I didn't like what I saw in my parents. So I didn't want it to happen to me. And then, so yeah, growing up in the church,
And
so
of course you had
that.
People will remember you talking about your experience of having desires to unalive yourself, throwing yourself in front of bus, and you didn't know why. So you were in the church, but actually you didn't have the peace and the strength of someone who, in principle, is in the church.
So I had a lot of doubts, self-doubts. And looking back at it, it actually started in primary school, where we had a scenario where we were playing as classmates, and when you like chasing each other around, playing tag and stuff, we chased a certain, it was a friend of mine, so I thought it was a friend. We chased a guy, one of the boys in our class, to a bathroom, but we were standing outside, obviously, because we know it's a girls' room. So we're standing outside and we're like, oh, okay, it ends there. I mean, you ran into a bathroom. There's nothing we can do. We can't tag you. We go back. Following day, Melissa was sexually assaulted, but I was like, how? Dude, we're together. So I'm there. I'm like, dude, we're together. Explain that it didn't happen. And she's like, no, Melissa, it's okay. You can talk about it. Don't be scared. And it was like being ganged upon. Literally, the whole class was on me. They're like, no, we know you're scared. You're quiet. No, just say it happened. And at the back of my mind, I'm like, it didn't. Why am I being forced to agree to something that didn't happen? I remember so much pressure that I agreed, but at the back of my mind, I'm like, dude, why aren't you saying anything? Why aren't you saying, no, it didn't happen? The guy kept quiet. So I went through primary school with that whole rumor that was spread about me. And it was like, no matter how much, I remember in grade 7, I got so frustrated. I almost beat someone up for the first time in my life, but I didn't. So I was very angry because I'm like, guys, we went through this at a young age, and I explained this. Why are we still going on with it? Why are we leaving to it and saying, this is what happened to her? And that, in a way, started being a thing of, no matter what I say, no one's going to believe. So I started doubting myself. So even when I got to high school, no matter how much I'd explain and tell you the truth, for me, I'd go back and go, was it really the truth? Are you sure? I doubted. I think that was my biggest thing. I was exposed to adult content. I had my emotional abuse that I faced, but the belief and doubt, those were the big things for me, because it was, would you trust me? Would you believe? I started even questioning myself to the extent of failing at school, to the extent of thinking I'm not good enough. So if, example, Stephanie says, Melissa, your hair is not nice, I'd take it to heart. If you told me I was not a good enough friend, that was it. Your word was everything to me. So I would take everything everyone says, because it's like, no, I have no say. Basically for me, I had no say in my life. So it was, everyone had an opinion. So if you guys come and say, you like this or you like that, that's it. We end there. That's Melissa for you. So I had no personality, I guess I can say. And it has a lot of, because of the doubts, then I wanted to, my life didn't matter to me in a way. It was, why should I do this? Why should I even bother? I mean, I was taken to psychiatrists at school. The school had to actually do it because they're like, we worried. Why is she acting this way? Why is she such a quiet? Why is she always crying? Why is she failing? She has the capability to pass. We see it. But when she gets in an exam...
And you were in the church by then.
Yeah, I grew up in the church. I doubted myself. I doubted God.
Normally it's like this.
I thought he had special kids. So you grow up and see others growing, maturing, and you're like, okay, what's wrong with me? Or maybe God has a selected few. Maybe I'm not one of them. So because I grew up feeling rejected by family, I also felt, okay, I don't fit in. No matter what I do, whether it's school, no matter what I say, there's always that rejection thing behind me. There's always that doubt of nothing is ever good enough that you do. You won't amount to anything. I didn't see myself leaving past the age of 21. I always thought, by then I'd be gone. But yeah, it was a battle.
But when you came to the church and you decided to give your life to God, the biggest challenge was still the doubt and the rejection.
It was. And
the thoughts. More than the action, the thoughts.
Because even though I knew and I heard, but it was that thing of, nah, God, we gave it a try. Come on, we gave it a try. I'm not misbehaving. I'm not dating. I'm not going outside. I'm not drinking. I'm not doing any of these things. Yes, adult content, I'd go, okay, I surrender it. Few months later, lapse the game. It was a cycle that never ended until I had to take a decision and go, nah, this is the worst. This is the most miserable I've ever seen myself. And when I took that decision, I was able to break free from it, but the doubts always remained.
So your biggest struggle was doubts. Even though doing everything right, away from sin, participating in the church, you still doubted yourself. And of course, when we have reserves about ourselves, we have reserves about God, isn't that? Tadi, you were born in the church. You grew up in the church. You have never left the church. But you were not converted.
Yes, and funny enough, I was never curious, as Sipo mentioned. I was like, nah, I don't want as well what they have. But at the same time, it was very hard because it was I would say, a empty life. Because at the same time, I don't want their life, the life of my friends at school, but also I'm not living the life that I grew up listening about. So it's this empty space. So it's not empty only inside of you, but it seems like everything around you is just empty. And one thing for those who grew up in church, we say that, but it doesn't really make a difference. If you are in church or if you're not in church, it doesn't really make a difference. So maybe those who are watching say, no, but I didn't grow up in the church. I didn't have the chance you had. And there is that pressure as well. But you grew up in the church, you know the truth. But as Percy mentioned, you are numb because you are just listening. It's like the trigonometry you learned about, but after you wrote that exam, you don't care about it anymore. So it's like that. You hear that word, but okay, maybe one day I'll need it. So it's very empty. It's a very dark life because once you don't know who you are, I think everyone struggled with knowing who you are because you are divided. Am I this one who goes to church and everyone expects perfection? Or am I this one who wants to go outside? Or am I in the middle and I don't know who I am? So this struggle and the thoughts as well. Although I was never exposed to adult content, but I used to make use of self-pleasure. And I have no idea how this came into my life. No idea. And it's that thing, you get rid, then a few months after, there you are again, doing again, and then you feel guilty because you hear in the church it's wrong, and then you, no, okay, now I decided I'm not going to do. And then it happens again, and it's that cycle that you stop believing you are able to overcome. You will stop believing that, actually you don't believe God will help you, and you try on your own, then you say, I'll never get rid of that.
There are stages, I guess. Then is the first stage, you don't care much because you still did not have that wake-up call that you need to pursue a life with God. Then there is a second stage. You want to have a life with God, but your setbacks convince you you're not going to get it. Up until you resist and you get to the third stage, that is conversion. You're able to quit the wrong you're doing, whatever it is, but there is always a challenge. What was your challenge?
For me, it was insecurities. I was very insecure as well. I didn't see any if people would say, what is your talent? No, I don't have. I don't have nothing. I have nothing good on me. I have nothing good to give to people. If they would ask, I remember there was a questionnaire that I was to fill, and the question was...
I know which questionnaire is this.
The question was, if you were to define yourself, if you were to describe yourself, who are you? And I was already an assistant in the church, but I was like, I'm nothing. I don't know how to describe myself, because it's so much of that up and down, up and down, up and down, that you lose yourself in the middle of all that. So I didn't know. So insecurities were the hardest thing for me.
Even after converting, you still had to battle insecurities. So all in all, I think we proved to you that once you decide to have a life with God, it's not a bed of roses. There is a battle out there. PJ, more than you were actually born in the church, but at a certain stage, you were just physically coming to the church. Tell us a little bit about that journey and your biggest challenge once you decided to remain.
Indeed, Miss Marcia, there were actually the two extremes of me coming, and then there was a time where I would not come. I was like bunking church straight up.
That is the first time I heard. I know bunking is called bunking church.
Yes, bunking church, because similar to one of them who said, I think it was Percy, who said, the mother, you have to, so you just live out of the pretense. But for me to sum it up, myself was definitely a lack of identity. I was like a chameleon who would fit into every background just to try to please people. I wanted that attention. I had that total confusion of personality, and that made me to always want to fit in. What was it that would please the crowd? If it would please the crowd, then I'm in, even if I would lose myself. And that obviously the ladies and the alcohol, the experiments of drugs, and the long list of substances which we got involved in at the time. I got involved in friends who were definitely of no positive influence to my life, until that similar to what most of them said here, that intense void and that confusion, because something I've learned, obviously I learned that after, that when you know the truth, there's no way to unknow the truth. There's no way to go back and say, oh, I don't know the truth. You can't be ignorant to what you are aware of. So like it or not, in every one of us here who grew up learning the truth, our subconscious is always in that battle. So that tug of war between what we know that is right and what we know is wrong. So I found myself in that, and that was, it was a hell, because I wanted to please these guys. I wanted to enjoy them, but I also wanted to be happy. And I know I wasn't. I was simply doing it to please them. I was making them happy. I was almost like that clown trying to please everybody. But ironically, I was destroying myself until I remember the hell I went through just to get home one weekend when I was with friends. And I'll never forget, my dad called in an afternoon, and there was a club which we would always watch them play. And that evening they were going to play the El Clasico, as they call it. And my dad randomly called me. When I was with my friends, they would just leave, be like, this guy's not interested, so let him be. But ironically, that day my dad called, and I was so happy to hear his voice. I literally was with my friend at his crib, and I said, excuse me, walked away from them. And ironically, from that moment, I decided I wanted to go home. And it was hell just to get home. My friend all of a sudden didn't want to take me. He had promised me to take me home. He didn't. They said, it's fine, drop me halfway, I'll take a taxi. Taxi leaves me in the middle of the highway. I had to walk home. I'd never walked on the highway. I remember walking home, and I understood at that moment how hard it was. Not only was I going to my physical father's house, but understand that I was actually going to my spiritual father who was calling me back. And it's ironic. We hadn't planned that everybody here would be people who grew up in the church. But it's so interesting how many people, as Miss Marcia said, have this misconception that this journey is a bed of roses. And how people, number one, expect perfection from someone who grew up in the church, and that naturally puts pressure on them. So just a tip for, if I can add this to the parents whose children are in church, please stop expecting perfection from your kids just because they grew up learning what maybe you didn't learn. So that pressure is naturally there. And secondly, the pressure in finding yourself, especially if your parents are ministers, pastors in the church. So naturally, people expect you. And I remember how many people would say to me, are you going to be a pastor? I hated that question. Please, that's my dad's choice. It has absolutely nothing to do with my choice. So much so that when I decided to follow that path, it was a surprise for them. They didn't know because I hadn't even told them. But this confusion really destroys a lot. It's good to see how many are here today, the 6 who are here today, myself, Tali, and many others who are watching us today who have been able to recover our path. But unfortunately, Miss Marcia, there are many who have not recovered because, number one, there is this pressure, and number two, they're completely lost inside of themselves. That loss of identity and that confusion, that tug of war between what I know is right, but what is enjoyable. And growing up, there's that famous acronym, YOLO, you only live once. You are young, enjoy. And that huge myth that people say, if you are young, you've got to enjoy your life. I know how many times myself being married at the age of 25, how many people looked at me and said, you're so young, why would you want to get married now? Why are you getting married now? Like, go and enjoy. And it's so interesting because you'd be like, who said I'm not enjoying my life at a young age? But there is that huge misconception most people have. If you are young and you decide to live an upright life, you are losing out in life. You're missing out in life.
We started the program saying that we would answer a question. They spoke about the background, not an easy ride for any of them, and how they remained. But before asking them in short words how they remained, I'm going to go back to Paul. In Corinthians, 2 Corinthians 9, 26, 27, he may be answering your question. He says like this, therefore, I run thus not with uncertainty. So the first thing we need to talk about it is to be sure. You really need to want it. Thus I fight, not as someone who beats the air, not without purpose. Second guideline, certainty and with a purpose. But I discipline my body and I bring it into subjection. Then he completes, lest when I preach to others, I don't lose myself. So, what should you do to overcome the temptation, the thoughts, the feelings that you have, if not doing exactly what Paul is teaching us? There is no other easy way. It's not a matter of, I'm going to pray and this will go away. You have to learn to discipline yourself. For it, you need to be sure. And you need to have a goal. Do you really want a life with Christ? It does not mean it's going to be simple, but it means it has a great reward. Discipline. If this is not good, if the Word of God says it's not good, there must be something that you're going to do. Instead of it, you're going to discipline, not to want, not to feed your thoughts, not to feel compassion, not to give justifications. You're going to run away from that, and you are going to receive the Word of God as your truth. So when God tells you, I love you, He does love you. So from each one of you, in practical terms, what have you done with your biggest challenge that helped you to remain? Sipo, rejection.
Wow. Okay, what I did wasn't so much as taking action from myself, because I had already acted out what I had to, but it was reaching an understanding about who God is, how big is His love, and what is He willing to do. Getting to the mere understanding that Paul was on his way to crucify Christians, and 4 days later he had the Holy Spirit, was like, okay, why not me? That was it. It had to click in myself. I had to forgive myself. I had to understand that God has forgiven me, and I had to become free. And then I had to believe in myself. I had to actually see myself with purpose, with vision, with direction, and say, okay, God, what is it that you want for me? Where do I want myself to go? Where do I see myself going? And now I will pursue it. And it sounds simple in words, but...
No, we know it's not simple, we know.
The act of it, of course, it is a mission, but I had to stick with it and move forward in that direction and say, I'm not going to give up. And that's what helped me to change, and I overcame.
Percy.
So basically, what I did...
Yours was relationship.
Yes.
Without content, the thoughts came.
And that's the thing, doesn't mean that I've taken the decision yesterday and now I've got this strength to actually remain in this decision. I realized how emotions play a big role into your decisions. So what I could say really helped is, when you feel something, don't act. So it may be in anything. For example, if you feel like giving up, don't give up when you feel like giving up. Give it a day. Tomorrow, will you feel like giving up? I really doubt. So in terms of my challenges, when the temptation was in front of me, the one thing I do is don't act. Don't do it. Just don't act. If possible, think of the temptation as, let's say a marshmallow, the test they do for kids, a marshmallow. When the marshmallow is in front of you, at that moment you want it the most, don't want it. Don't touch it. Don't do anything. It can be in front of you, but don't submit to it. I am telling you, the very next day...
Subject your body.
Don't subject your body to it. I'm telling you, the very next day, you'll see that it was emotion, because you won't want it the very next day. When you're in a clear space, and be mindful, these temptations come when you're alone, especially in my circumstances. When you're alone, or when you're pushed into a corner where you have to act on maybe a lady or a woman. Basically, when there's something in front of you that you want, my biggest take on it is, at that moment when you want it, don't do it. Don't act on it. I'm very sure that the very next day, you won't want it.
And the feeling that you overcame, the feeling that you...
Powerful.
I didn't fall for that marshmallow, and today, why did I want it?
It's like, that feeling is like, I can say, it's accomplishment when you do it, and it feels good that, it was just temporary. But when it's there in front of you, it's like, I cannot live without it. You know very well you can live without it. But when it's in front of you, it's like, yeesh, I want this now. So yeah, that's how I conquered. Don't act.
Dino, how did you get out of that dependence on the circle of friends and the violence?
Okay, what I did was that I had to sit down at some point and analyze myself, because I had understood that in as much as I have a lot of friends, like going out to parties, all of us there, we are suffering, like internally. And one of the greatest needs that I needed in my life at that time was peace, you see. And because I'll be there at home laughing with my family members, but deep down I was suffering, you see. So I had to sit down and say, okay, instead of me like going like, forward with the suffering that I'm experiencing inside of me, let me put all these things aside, because they're not benefiting me with anything. So our greatest need as young people is peace, you see, because we go all over like seeking for it and we don't find. And I was one of them. So I had one thing that I wanted in my life, that was peace. So I saw everything, my friends, like, how popular I was that time. I was like, you know what, I'm going to put this aside, because in as much as I have this popularity and these friends, these girlfriends and everything, still inside I'm suffering. So I came to a conclusion that everything aside, I want peace for myself. And that's
so you had to be honest and stop and reason.
Exactly.
I like this, but I need this, and this is more important. I'll have to go for it.
That's how I overcame. It was not easy. It was not easy, because sometimes I'm in the church and you meet other people, new people, and at some point you still remember those people that you used to have before, your friends, you see, because they speak a different language now.
And funny enough, it seems that the friends in the church are not that interesting like the ones outside, isn't it?
I used to say that to my mother at some point. I was like, you know what, because I was someone who was into ladies back then. And I would say to my mother one time, like, man, there is something that I don't understand here, because when I look at these ladies in the church, when I look at the guys in the church, and I look at my friends outside, there is a huge difference. This was like, they don't have that vibe. But
you're going to find out soon if not.
You see, but we realized that where there is more vibe, like in all honesty, there is no peace there.
The real vibe.
Exactly, because there outside there is a lot of noise. I would go to parties and you listen to 5 songs at the same time, like this music, we are there dancing. But when you come to the church, then you realize that there is order here, you see. And what caught my attention was that I even said to my mother one time that all these people, they are happy. When I'm in the youth, I see like these young people, they are happy there, they're speaking about peace, and I'm like, these people, they are so happy, but what about me at some point? Because they're outside, like, there is everything that I want, but inside there, these people, they are happy, but we are suffering outside, you see. So there was something interesting about being in there, even though I grew up in the church, but when I came to my senses and sat down, I realized that you are missing out a lot of things in the church, you see. But most of all that I ever wanted in my life was to have peace inside of me, and of which I found.
And you had to pay the price for that.
I had to pay the price because I had to let go of a lot of things. I had to quit like friends. I had to quit girlfriends. But what I did also with my ex-girlfriends, I remember at some point that I called most of them to ask for forgiveness for what I did to them. Some of them, they were like, "Now we knew you as a good guy. There's that you had a bad circle around you." And deep down, I knew that was not even my character, because I was doing those things because of what happened in my family and also the surrounding that I had. And I asked for forgiveness. Some of them, they forgave. Some of them, they took time, but they came back and said, "Okay, we forgive you." And those forgiveness that I got from them, they really freed me, like honestly.
Amen. Melissa, doubt about yourself, doubt about God. What have you done that you remained?
For me, the most important thing, I think the biggest step was actually reaching out for help, because I kept everything in told no one, and it was a thing of I don't want to bother someone else with my problems. So when I finally reached out, it was like all these monsters I created in my head weren't that big as I thought they were, and there was actually a solution for it. So that for me was a big step, because it's like everything was impossible, and now you're finding yes, you feel it's impossible, but there's a way out. So that for me was the biggest thing for me, and it was taking a decision. Like when I say decision is, I've always been a cry baby to myself, not in front of people, but to myself. I mean, but why God, why this, like that? But it was that thing of, no, Mel, if he said it, then it's that. End of story. Why try go back and forth in it and argue it? Rather go to him and go, okay, you said this, let's have an argument. Where is it? Here's my thing, here's your thing. God, what do you want for me? And really that confrontation, that thing of now going, because I didn't really have much of a close relationship with parents. So it was that thing of he became a parent. So anything I needed, I start crying to. Anything I wanted to talk about, it was him. So now it was complete dependence. So that doubt had to move for me to be able to go. You know, when you need transport money, you to go to a parent and go ask for it. So now how can I ask if I don't believe? So now I had to put aside that disbelief and go, okay, God, this is the situation. Let's work through it.
Great. Stephanie, adult content persecuted you and you persecuted it.
Yes, I did.
Who won the fight?
I won the fight.
How?
So I think two things changed. Firstly,
just to give you an idea, we have here 6, 7. All of you addicted to adult content. And that is the majority of people we speak out there. So having access to internet, it was great from one angle, but it narrowed a lot relationships because of this. So it's important because you are speaking how you overcame it. And it's important because there are many people out there who are still struggling with that inside the church, maybe seeking for the Holy Spirit, wanting to change their life, but losing this battle.
So I think for me, firstly, my mind changed, my understanding changed. Like Ms. Talisa said, that I was in this constant cycle of going back and forth, and eventually you start to lose hope that you can ever change, that you can ever overcome this. So I was in that cycle until I heard a word of God saying from the Bible, you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. And then my understanding changed, and eventually I understood. I was like, wait a minute, I've been trying to overcome this on my own for so long. What if I just ask Jesus to help me? What if he can become my strength in my weakness? And I remember I went there in my bedroom all alone. I was determined. I was like, my God, I need you to become my strength. I take a decision to give it up. But if you don't help me, if you don't take it away, I'm going to be stuck in this constant cycle. So I need you to take it away. And from that day going forward, never again did I consume any content. My mind changed, my understanding. I had this firmness, this arrogance. I knew that Jesus had taken it away from me. And I went, and the way that I actually maintained it was I would always think about the consequences, because something different happened that day in that room, and I knew it. And I knew that if I consumed content again, I was going to go backwards, and I didn't want to go backwards anymore after having received that word, that strength to change.
So you own the word of God. You just, that moment you did not read only.
Yes.
You owned it, and you thought about consequences.
I consumed that word. It became me.
That's another great
I was very sure. I was like, no, this is it. And at that moment, I knew that this is the word that I needed to change, because it gave me such strength. And I just went there and I was like, my God, this is it. And if you don't help me, if you don't become my strength, I'm going to fall back. And that's how it changed. And then moving forward, it was just always remembering the consequences. If I consume this, what will happen? So I was afraid of the consequences. I was afraid of going backwards. I was afraid of losing this word that I received, this new life that I received. I was afraid. So yeah, that was it for me.
Thank you. Adorable.
Okay, for me, I had to go back to the drawing boards with myself. I had to sit down with myself and actually see what everything that I thought about myself stemmed from. So I had to go back and seek help for all that was happening in my head internally also. And me reaching out for help actually helped me to actually understand myself even better, because in as much as I was internalizing each and everything that happened and I pretended it was a box that I didn't want to touch ever in my life, I took the decision to actually open those boxes that triggered me, open those boxes that actually I was uncomfortable to open. And once I started speaking up and seeking the help, little by little, a lot of the things changed, and I was able to know who I am, what I'm capable of. And by me knowing who I am and what I'm capable of, I started believing in the God that I knew at first as somebody who was an authority, but as a father, somebody who loved me, because I understood myself. I got to understand who God was.
So your tip started with deal with whatever scares you.
Yes.
Because just to push aside will not sort it out. But once you confront, you deal, then and reach out for help, you're going to be able to remain.
Yes, definitely. Don't be scared to speak up. Don't ever think that whatever that you went through is a taboo or somebody is not willing to listen, because there's always somebody out there who is willing to sit down and listen to what you've went through and assist you into actually overcoming it. Because alone you tell yourself, okay, I've dealt with it, I'm done. But in actual fact, it's just you putting it aside so that you don't have to go through it over and over again. But you still do. So just reach out for help and actually make the decision to say, okay, finding myself, I'm rebranding myself. And once you do that, you'll be able to know who God is and you'll be able to know who you are.
Tani, you don't have the right to say how you overcame. Because yours was insecurity. And today you have to prove the point, because you have to do programs, you do meetings with your husband, you are here with me, and you're going to lead us in prayer now, okay?
Yes.
So that shows you overcame, you remained, right?
Exactly. And I actually, all that I did was what they said. So I would just repeat. But here's the proof that I overcame.
Yeah.
So let us pray.
Let us pray.
My Lord and my Father, we thank you once again for learning so much from each other. And right now I ask that you may reach those who are watching, and maybe all that we spoke here was numb for them. They were numb for it, and they didn't really understand. They were distracted with other things. They maybe want to have what we are talking about here, but they still don't believe. They still struggling, my Father. So I pray that right now you do what none of us can do and none of us could do for ourselves. There was a point that we were 100% depending on you, on your touch, on your help. Otherwise we wouldn't be here today. So I pray that at least for one person, my Father, I know you are going to do to many more, but that you reach out, that you do what no one can do for this person right now who is struggling, be it with insecurities, doubts, problem, addiction, family problems, anger. You know what they are going through, and you are the only one who can rescue them from this emptiness, from this void that they are feeling. That's why I surrender all their lives into your hands, and I pray that in future they will be here telling their story, speaking about that one day in a program that they didn't really understand what was going on. They felt something different. They were touched in something in a different way. That's what I ask you. And I thank you already, because I am sure that you listen to our prayer. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
I wouldn't judge anyone getting married young. I really wish I did get married young.
They just got married right now.
In the order they getting married in a customary union, which now have been held by the personal court that is automatically information of property.
And then modern day marriage is not okay. The system favors women more, and it's not even.
Some say it's reckless. Others call it commitment. Is getting married young a mistake or a bold beginning?
PJ, we didn't forget about you after the prayer. Of course, you have converted, you remained. And what was the thing that made you to remain?
Yes, Miss Marcia, here we are. We remained. And when we say we, I'm no longer riding solo. You know that suitable helper? That's exactly where the Lord helped me.
So what was the question they made to you? Why are you getting married so young?
So they asked me, you're so young. I remember it was when I was sorting out my driver's license, and the guy, I think, saw my wallpaper with a lady, who's my wife, and the ring. And oftentimes, quite a few times, people would ask me, you are married? Even in the school visits, you are married, but you look young. And they'll be like, why aren't you enjoying your life? And like I said, little do they know how much I'm actually enjoying my life.
So, you're going to have the right to ask them those questions. Why did they get married so young? Melissa, do you believe in marriage now?
Yes, I do.
And Dino, did you find a woman with vibe?
Yes, I did find it.
That's all for today, because you're going to have the right to answer to all our questions and to talk about marriage to the young and to mature people with my husband in our round 2 in March. Until then, thank you very much for joining us today, knowing that you need to come back, and God bless you all. Bye-bye.
The first step to healing is simply reaching out. If you or someone you know needs support, email woman-to-woman@uckg.org.za or call 0800 330 320. Our toll-free helpline offers confidential, non-judgmental support.